These videos are about regular people talking about the things that divide us, immigration, race, Trump, etc., so they might offend you. But I hope they're useful, like some videos I made about home repairs that helped thousands of people. You see, I hate doing my own home repairs. I don't want to listen to a professional home repair guy who makes it look easy. TV pundits give me the same vibe. I don't want to listen to these people. When you see them on TV, they're at work. It's their job to talk about this stuff. They're not really interested in learning from each other and fixing the problem. They sure don't ask the questions I would ask. So me and my brother, who is himself progressive, we drove to 22 cities and interviewed dozens of people who support progressive causes. And I learned this: it's our feelings that divide us, feelings driven by personality. Some of us want to be the innovators, the trusting, the idealists. Some of us want to be the managers, the cautious, the realists. And each of us builds a fortress around our feelings that you can't break through with facts and arguments. But maybe we shouldn't try. Apparently, evolution or God or whatever made us this way for a purpose. I think that purpose is that we need each other to get the full picture. I know it works that way with other things, but we have to talk to each other. If we don't talk to each other, we won't make progress. In Santa Rosa, we talked to Veronica Jacobi, a city council member for 4 years, who's a candidate for the California State Senate, District 2, in the November 2018 election. She's a mechanical engineer by trade who for 35 years has specialized in energy management and conservation of energy and resources. We started by asking her to describe her concerns.
Well, when I decided to have 2 children, I thought they would have a chance at a better life than I had or equal. And now I'm very, very concerned because climate change is impacting us and others. And 10 years ago, I was saying we needed to address wildfire preparedness in Santa Rosa, that we were at risk and wildfires would become greater and more severe. And Santa Rosa has done a number of things, but we did not prepare for wildfires to the level needed, and there's been huge suffering. One person who was running from the fire said it was like being chased by hell. Climate change and physics doesn't wait for us, so there is great urgency. And there are great things happening, but not at the speed and scale needed yet.
Okay. What is your opinion of the folks that are, that are on the other side, who are skeptical, whether it's anthropogenic or not?
My opinion is that there have been a number of skeptics who have changed sides because they could no longer, in good conscience, remain skeptics. They looked at the facts and they changed. And one of them, in fact, said that within 100 years, the human species might be extinct. Now, if that doesn't alarm everyone on this planet who cares about anyone, I don't know what will. But it alarms me, and I know there are the solutions. We've had the solutions for a long time, but it's time for action. And a long time ago, Roosevelt said, there is nothing to fear but fear itself. And sometimes I think people get afraid when they look at climate change. They feel, what can I do? And there are many things that we can do. And I do have a website that's ourgreenchallenge.org, and it does need to be updated, but there are things we can do individually, there are things we can do collectively, and I'm doing everything I can, and I'm being very careful of my personal footprint, and other people can do that too.
Okay.
And it's fun a lot of the time.
Okay. So you do not have any ambiguity in your mind that this is real, that there is no contrarian opinion that has any credibility? The contrarian opinions, the peer-reviewed stuff is all that climate change is happening. It's human caused, and we need to deal with it. The few remaining quote unquote skeptics, those arguments have all been addressed and they've been counteracted. So I feel very strongly, and I'm very clear, that the time to act is now, and there's no everyone is impacted, and everyone's children
everyone's children are impacted, and the time to act is now, period.
Maybe it's a silly question, but is it my imagination, or do folks who say, I don't believe the science is settled on this, I'd like to research it some more, does that, when people say that, does that anger a lot of folks who take your position?
I don't know. I know that there have been people who have been paid by the fossil fuel industry to research it and said, yes, the climate is changing and I'm concerned. So that's what I pay attention to. And I'm grateful to those people who went against their financial interests and who was paying them and went for the truth.
Okay.
And the truth is important.
Okay.
It affects everyone.
Okay, so no ambiguity and no credible contrarian position in your mind.
Correct.
Okay, fine. I remember when the solution for urban renewal was still being described as building these tall buildings in the middle of the city where folks that needed housing would stay. This was something that there was really no disagreement from the 40s to the 70s. That was the solution that all of the experts had. And of course now it was a complete debacle. You just cannot imagine how much human suffering was caused by the fact that everybody who had an opinion, except for a very few outliers, everyone who, and those outliers were ignored, everyone who had an opinion, who was in a position of authority within the government, within academia, all the best architects, all the best social workers, all the best social scientists said, we need to build what became later called the projects, right? These projects, of course, huge debacle. They're all being torn down. Nobody would defend it. And they're going back to what the contrarians were saying back in the 40s, which is build things that are 2 or 3 stories high, make it more of a community. So do you understand the skepticism that a conservative would have that, telling us that, giving us numbers like 97% of people agree or scientists agree, we look at that with a healthy skepticism.
I don't think it's healthy. Facts are facts and studies are studies. And when a person who studies climate change gets, most of the climate scientists have had huge emotional suffering trying to convince the masses that this is important. And I personally have wished, prayed, worked to figure out how to reach people. Because I can't protect my children and your children, and I've had 6 foster children, and I can't protect them alone. My footprint alone won't do it. It needs to be many solutions. Like I didn't need to buy an electric car because I can bicycle and I can use mass transit and I can use trains when I travel and I can use buses. So I could get my footprint lower. But I did help buy an electric car because my daughter and her fiance, they need to get to work and they believe they need to get to work as fast as they need to go. So, for them, riding a bike and taking the bus, it doesn't feel like an option for them. And I can't buy everyone an electric car. I can't afford that. But when we subsidize fossil fuels, when we subsidize pollution that is hurting people, to me, that's insane. To me, that's crazy. When, let's let go of the things that aren't good for us and let's move towards the things that we know are good for us. I'm an energy management specialist. Saving energy is a win-win-win. turning off the lights when you're not using them, that doesn't hurt anyone that I know of. You know, it's just it's a win-win-win. It's a win for everyone. And that's how I look at climate solutions. I want the solutions that are a no-brainer, that are a win-win-win, and we have those.
What would you say to folks that are, well, I guess, no, this is a terrible question because I don't have a question. I just wanted to tell you I'm not convinced. And what would you say to somebody who's not convinced? Because, you know, that's the impasse that we have here. You know, I'm very skeptical because I've seen, you know.
So
but you're very convinced.
So if 97% of the reputable doctors said that you should do something, you wouldn't do it?
Okay, no, that's the thing. I don't want to argue facts with you, right? But that 97% number, it's a number that there are people skeptical about that.
It's not.
The Australian researcher, John Cook, who came up with that figure, there's a lot of doubt about where he came up with that 97. That was the primary. Well, and we do disagree.
And there are websites that have addressed every contrarian argument and disputed them and torn them apart. And so I encourage you to go there.
I have gone to both of them, and I wanted to ask you, have you gone to Prager University and watched their videos? Have you seen the contrarian arguments?
When I was on the Santa Rosa City Council, the Heartland Institute would send us things. The Heartland Institute is funded by fossil fuel industries and other industries that want to there's a lot of money in holding on to old technology, but there's even more money in going for a bright future. And you know, there may be people that think that money is the most important thing. I don't. A future, being able to breathe, being able to drink the water, you know, things like that are important. And I think probably 99% of us agree with that. And I would think even 100% of us agree with that.
So I can understand your skepticism because, you know, the stuff that you see that's pro fossil fuels is coming from sources that benefit from them being pro fossil fuel. Do you understand my skepticism when the things that I see that are describing this as the science is settled are coming from people for whom they get an economic benefit?
I don't think they get an economic benefit. I think they get paid for their work, and that's the conclusion they've arrived at. Also, I haven't met this person directly, but I've seen it. I've seen the footage, but I've met someone who has met the father of a child who lived next to a coal slurry plant and what that did to his child and to their home. This moved in after they bought their home, and it destroyed their home. Their home is worthless. They can't sell it. And so they have the choice of being penniless and moving, or staying in their home and their child continuing to suffer. That isn't a fair choice.
Well, I don't think anybody would have an argument with that. And that's one of the, you know, that's one of the good uses of government, is to make sure that, you know, folks that do ill pay for it. Mm-hmm. You're saying in this instance that's just not what's happening. Is that what you're saying?
Rephrase your question.
A polluter who's destroyed somebody's neighborhood. Mm-hmm. You're saying the government is saying this is fine, and they're not going to. There's nobody's trying to remedy this.
There are cases where things are not remedied soon enough. I mean, we know the story of Erin Brockovich, but it took a lot to get to justice, and justice hasn't been done enough because it hasn't been taken care of enough. That it's impacted us. Clean energy is a win-win-win, and fossil fuel companies could be saying, yeah. And they were doing that, but they wanted to, I guess, pull the last few dollars. But the last few dollars are at a huge cost. And solar is now more cost effective than gas. Natural gas is not a clean fuel. For a while, people were saying it's a clean fuel. However, when it escapes, there are leaks, and that is like a methane leak, which is very, very bad for the greenhouse gases. So it's not a clean fuel. So fossil fuels. Sure, they're good for some things. They are good for some things, but let's save them for those important uses, and let's use clean energy that's going to give us the future that we can feel good about, and that our children can have a future, and that they can have a climate that we can depend on. Every summer and every fire season, I go, are we going to make it through this one? It is December and there are fires in California.
Well, and you're drawing the conclusion that this is a direct relationship to the use of fossil fuel, or to global warming or climate change?
It's a result of climate change, and yeah, it is. We have been breaking temperature records month after month.
I'm just kind of curious, if you're a fan of fossil fuels, and I am a fan of fossil fuels, I don't understand why we're telling the world, after we've had our own, industrial revolution, where we completely, we didn't care about the environment for 150 years.
Well, we didn't know.
Yeah,
or those who did know 40 years ago that climate change was real hid the fact and distorted it. And it's time for that to end.
And as a result, we had tremendous economic progress because we industrialized our whole country.
We could have, the cleanest communities are having wonderful economic results. So it is not, you can have a win-win-win and have it be a win for financially.
Okay,
the fires have created huge economic burdens, huge. And without climate change, that fire may have happened, but my guess, but it's an educated guess. I'm a mechanical engineer. I like to analyze things. My guess is the damage from the fire would have been somewhere between 2 to 50% of what it currently was. Even 50% less would have meant everything too. I mean, we might have not had lives lost. We might have just had property loss. 50% would still be huge, but if it was only 2%, we might have just had property loss that wasn't that significant, But people lost their homes. One of the people who's now on our board of supervisors, she lost her home. It's ashes now. She was on the city council with me when I was talking about wildfires,
Well, I don't know. There's no answer I can give you as to, is it fair to say that this is speculation on your part? Because I don't know how to answer a question like that. I mean, it's obvious that you believe that the climate change that you fight so strongly against was responsible for some fires here.
It was, yes. I mean, it impacted it. The fire, 150 miles per hour, the combination of the wind plus the fire. The elite firefighters, they talk about fires like they've never seen before.
Okay.
They used to have gear where they could, if they couldn't get away quickly enough, they could shelter themselves. That gear doesn't work anymore. They get incinerated. This is serious stuff. This isn't, it's serious. And the economic impacts are huge.
Okay. I'll take your word on that, because that sounds like you know what you're talking about when it comes to that. Do you believe then that renewables, without the government subsidies that are being given to them right now, are a viable alternative to fossil fuels?
Yes, I believe renewables are outcompeting fossil fuels in many instances, and fossil fuels have been subsidized huge quantities. And if that money was reinvested in win-win-win solutions, that would be a wonderful thing. And I hope, I've heard that most fossil fuel employees want to have a carbon tax. They want carbon pollution paid for. They want to have a carbon fee because we have fees on pollution. And you know, fossil fuels have negative impacts. Yes, they can create wonderful things. There are certain things that we need them for, but we need to save them because, first of all, there's not an infinite supply. So why don't we save them, advance clean energy, and use fossil fuels only for what we need them for. And I don't care if fossil fuels get really, really expensive and fossil fuel companies still make plenty of money. I just want a good planet. I want my grandchildren to have a chance at a good life.
Okay. Do you understand our skepticism when we see that all of the things that progressive activists have been, you know, kind of pressing for the last 30 years, that all of those things just kind of come along with this theory of anthropogenic climate change? I mean, the folks that don't want industrialization, the folks that don't want fossil fuels to be used. You know, it's this one wonderful package where if we can just convince the world that climate change is real and climate change is urgent, then all of these, you know, it's like this big, tidy birthday gift. All the things that progressives have wanted for years and years just kind of come along with that. Do you understand our skepticism when it seems like, okay, you know,
I don't think,
this kind of gives you everything you've always wanted?
Yeah, I think that's a false and distorted argument. But
How so?
Well,
I'm very skeptical.
I'm going to try to respond if you let me.
Thank you.
And sometimes when you're lumping a lot of things together that I don't think need to be lumped together. Okay. Climate change impacts all of us. And
but that's not an a priori. You can't just say that, and I'm just going to sit here like a lump on a log. How does it affect? I mean, climate change, yes, it is a global thing.
It does affect all of us. Anyone who's in the path of a major disaster, the people on the hill that burned down here in Santa Rosa, they were they had every viewpoint. And the fire didn't say, oh, we're going to leave you alone and take your house and not the other one. The fire, there are some people that prepared and you know, had a sprinkler dripping from their roof and had a wood house and their house survived. I don't know if the fire went right through there or not, you know.
Sure.
But climate change is an issue. It's real. We need to address it. It is going to hurt everybody. It's not going to just pick people who are conservative or people who are progressive. It's going to hurt everyone. And the person who said it was like hell chasing her, trying to get away from that fire, I don't know what her background is. I don't know what the banker that I went to the other day, who I asked, you know, how did the fire impact you? And he said, my wife and I, we rethought everything. We now have solar on our roof and we bought an electric car. You know, I didn't ask him if he was conservative or progressive. I love conservatives. I love progressives. My grandfather was a conservative. My grandmother, I'm not sure. She convinced him that she was a progressive. My mother is a conservative. I love her, but it's very hard for me that she's fighting against me when I'm trying to protect my children and her grandchildren. It's very hard for me that she doesn't. She sees. I mean, my town was destroyed by a fire, a large part of it. I wasn't in my home when my husband called that morning saying that he might have to evacuate, but I certainly was here in spirit, and I was helping him create the evacuation list, and you know, he packed up the car. I felt very helpless. I love people who are conservatives. I love people who are Republicans. I love people who are Democrats. I love people who are Greens. I love people who are libertarians. I'm trying to protect everyone, you know?
Right.
And like I said, I had foster children. Before I had foster children, I knew my kids were special. Everyone's kids are special. Every single child is special. And I can't just protect my children. If I could, I'd be tempted, but I can't. We're all in this together. And that's hard, and that's also beautiful, because if we're all in this together, and if we all work at this together, and if we all look, you know, what do we really want 100 years from now? Do we want to risk human beings being extinct? Do we want to risk our beloved dogs and cats and deer? Do we want trees dying? I mean, our earth is beautiful, and I know many people who said that they would gladly give their lives if they could change climate change, and I'm one of them. And I've been hit by a car on my bicycle. I've had my pannier pushed and made to crash on my bicycle. And I still, and yes, you can ride bikes on bike paths and all that, but I still ride a bicycle. I love it. And it's good for me, and it's good for everybody else. And yes, sometimes it's not good for me if someone doesn't see me, but I do sacrifice myself. I do put myself at greater risk. And overall, it works out really well. You know, I healed, and I healed quickly. And, you know, I have muscles because I ride my bike. I have muscles because I don't use electric powered tools as much, or, you know, fossil fuel powered tools as much. So it works for me, but it doesn't work every second, you know? And thank you.
Well, I wish I had better news for you, from just, you know, to say anything that would make you feel like, you know, like.
I have tremendous faith in humanity. We have all the things we need. We just need to use them. And fossil fuel companies can be part of the mix. We can all work together.
You make such a convincing argument that there's, you know, not one molecule of insincerity in your belief in this. And I feel bad because I remain skeptical, and I only remain skeptical because I don't like this. I don't like the confluence of activism and science that pushes an agenda that seems like it's been an agenda that's been very, very long in the making.
No.
It just seems like it's too
No.
great a coincidence.
No. Pollution is pollution. I mean, do you live near pollution?
You remember when we were children, pollution was a lot worse than it is today.
And we worked on it.
Yes.
We worked on it. And yes. And
okay, so once there is agreement, now you're saying there's agreement right now, and I'm saying, well, I don't see it. I have looked at both, and I don't think there's agreement.
You haven't looked at both.
I believe I have.
I don't believe it. I don't believe you've thoroughly looked at the sites that counteract every single argument. I mean,
okay, no, that's fine. And you know, there's other YouTubers that will sit down and go point by point, and some support and some refute. But my point was, I have this skepticism that that I know it must just disappoint you terribly, because you know, I believe in the same way that we are no longer, you know, the river in Cleveland is no longer catching on fire, because once they recognized the problem, there were solutions. Industry responds, maybe not very well, and it doesn't destroy the conservative argument when industry, some bad players end up, you know, doing things that are illegal, and they get punished for it, and maybe they get punished enough. But, you know, those are things that don't negate the idea that that we generally can have solutions to the things that we agree on. Right now, I don't think we agree on this. If there were agreement on this, then, you know, I wouldn't see roughly half the country thinking that this is just something that's coming out of academia and politicians and activists.
That's not true.
And maybe it's not half, but there's
not true.
A group.
It's not true.
Okay. What would you put it at?
Smokers, do you smoke?
No, not at all.
Are there people who smoked who were told that it was healthy for years and years and years and years and years? Yeah, it wasn't healthy.
Okay. No, touche. You got a very good point.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on that note, that's a great way to end it, because you're right. I mean, if I'm wrong on this and you're right on this, then there's just no way we should gamble. We should do everything.
Right.
I mean, there are trade-offs. I'm not going to get into the details, but you would agree that there are trade-offs with, just going straight to just getting rid of our fossil fuel use.
I've already said that saving our fossil fuels for what we need it for most is a great thing to do.
Okay.
There are so many ways to come to win-win-win.
Okay.
But there are some things that just don't make sense at this point in time, and they just aren't worth the risk.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you.
That was Roni Jacobi in Santa Rosa, candidate for District 2 California State Senate. I'd like to thank her for talking to us about climate change and the nature of our disagreement on the science. I hope you consider supporting this series by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Thanks.